And on BBC Two now, how it all began. Punk spat in the face of the norm and sent shockwaves through the establishment. Arena traces its origins from fetish fashion to notorious Sex Pistols. The programme contains some sexually explicit scenes and strong language.
We have punk parents, we have punk politicians, we have punk clergymen, and we have punk sportsmen. I'm thinking of a young boy in a prison cell that crawled on his hands and knees toward me, 17 years of age. His mother wouldn't go and see him. His clergyman refused to see him. He took my hands, he wept like a baby, and he said, "Pastor, help me." I was able to take that young man and help him.
I think that punk rock is the best exercise in rock and roll that's ever been attempted.
Imps, yes?
Right.
And demons did appear. Foul noises sent by the devil. In 1762, a well was being dug. In 1927, a new tube extension. And now, do you see? They're all disturbances of the ground.
I really hate the word punk, and I hate the sort of sentimentality that creeps in when you talk, you know, people tend to talk about that time.
It was about great sort of heroic things, really. Not about, I'm going to spit at you. All the great people of punk and of that era weren't negative, not one of them.
The traits that got associated with punk all originated in New York, except for a kind of a political orientation that was brought to it in England, anarchy.
A lot of people who would be outraged if you suggested that their lives had been in any way coloured by punk. The fact that you can tell by looking at them that it very much has been. You have to go to a fairly remote part of the world to avoid it.
It's undeniable that things have reached such an extent after the sort of plundering that's gone on the last 1,000 years that this planet is almost completely fucked. I think punk was part of that exposure. But it was very much a phenomenon of the end of the Piscean Age, punk, because we are going into an Aquarian one, whether you like it or not.
Jumping, leaping.
Leave him alone. Where?
Right up into the sky.
They are punk rockers. The new craze, they tell me. They're heroes, not the nice, clean Rolling Stones. You see, they're as drunk as I am. They are clean by comparison. They're a group called the Sex Pistols. And I'm surrounded now by all of them.
In action.
Just let us see the Sex Pistols in action.
Punk for me didn't really exist. Punk for me was just when all the kind of girly magazines like oh, I don't know, 16 or Honey or something like that started showing those kind of fashions. It was very much a rock and roll thing. The Pistols were really the last great rock and roll band.
They take the mickey out of our music. They rip drapes up, don't they? They rip them up. They got whole creepers on and their socks, earrings, short hair. It all stems from a bit of skin, a bit of Ted. They take the piss all the time. So everyone I see, bus, along the road, in the swimming bars, I give them a good eye.
Well, to me, they look effeminate. They look like some sort of third sex. They look like invaders from another planet or something.
Oh, fuck, it's awful. I hate songs like that. The Pits.
I used to work at Whiteley's and I had a bit of a run-in with them then, and I had to find another job quite quickly. This was just as a Saturday kind of guy for some beer money for the week. And I also was looking for a pair of creepers, and somebody had told me that there was a shop down the King's Road that did it, which was Malcolm's shop, which was called Let It Rock at that stage. Went in there, was really struck by the attention to detail that they had in Evoke in the 50s. They had a big jukebox in there, and there was some kind of weirdo type people hanging out there. I asked them if they needed anybody to work there. Knowing I had to have a job and a pair of creepers, I thought maybe I'd get them a bit cheaper if I was working there. So as luck would have it, they did want somebody, so I ended up working there.
The Teddy Boy thing and all of that for me was all about the idea of being a peacock, you know, and standing out in the crowd, but at the same time feeling a sense that you are part of the dispossessed, which at the end of my art school term, I thought I could make a profit by if I created a scene in the most fashionable quarter of London at the time, the King's Road, a scene that would be a counterpoint to what was going on, which was still the remnants of dandy fashions and that 60s look of velvet loons and so on that was being sold out of shops like Granny Takes a Trip.
I very much got into extreme dressing, very high shoes, see-through, diaphanous clothes, but much in the 50s vein. Very cinched-in waists and high bouffant hairstyles. And I found that when I came to look at shops like Let It Rock, which was in the King's Road here, I was very much on a parallel with what people like Vivienne Westwood were doing at the time.
Subversion lies in unpopular ideas, because the world is full of popular ideas that are constantly being mixed around. And all the orthodox doctrinaire received opinion, that is what popular ideas are about. And it's only unpopular ideas that are capable of slowly gleaning a few disciples until the end, till in the end it's possible for them to have an effect because they are original.
Most things that I did in those days were really gut, you know, just gut feelings and exploring worlds that I found seductive. And I guess if I had to put myself online at the time to basically prevent myself from being beaten up by what were Uxbridge teddy boys coming in, pilfering in the store, and in the end there were too many for me to combat, I decided to go down another route, one that also dealt with clothes that spawned another sexuality. And I think the idea of sex clothes that could be bought only in the mail order catalogues at the bottom of the pages of the back of the Observer through brown paper being sent through the post intrigued me no end, and I went off in search to discover how these clothes were made and who were the people making them and could I do biz with them. And built up a little network and found them to be a whole vast army, underground army in England, making, for want of a better description, rubber and leather fetish wear. And I felt that that would look fun and exciting on the King's Road because it would have a similar, similar kind of effrontery that Teddy Boy clothes had, except it would be new because it hadn't been seen in that context. And the thought that you would sell it to the young and uninitiated, to the virgins of the street, from as far afield as Beckenham High School or somewhere, you know, excited me no end.
I commuted, I should think, for about 2 years from Seaford, which is very small and very sleepy. When I started working here, the frontispiece of the shop was just being changed from Let It Rock to Sex, and they had this big rubber sign, sex sign, above. There was a mixture of clientele. It was very, very interesting. I remember Vivian and I behind a screen here once, and she was saying to me, "You'll have to do it. I'm not going in there trying that on." And the bloke was standing in there. And I said, "Well, I'm not doing it. It's your shop, you'll have to do it." In the end, I think she did go in. I heard this dreadful slapping from behind the screen. And she came out looking a bit dishevelled. I think the bloke brought the mask. Malcolm and Vivian had a very strange relationship. Fraught might be the word for it. I've never been quite sure exactly what the percentage of work and what came from where. But, I mean, I've certainly seen a few punch-ups between them. They never, ever compromised. If they wanted a special button for a jacket, then they would search to the ends of the earth until they found it. It had to be just right. All the rubberware being treated properly before it came in the shop and being polished, and they were perfectionists.
When it rained, the whole of the King's Road was empty. You'd look in all the shops, but my shop was full. And I used to wake up in the morning, and you know how it rains so much in England, perhaps a little less today, because of the old green thing, but then, because it rained, I just knew. I'd wake up in the morning, I was so happy because I knew my shop would be full, because all the rubber people love to come out in the rain because they can wear their rubber clothes. And my shop would be filled, people driving from Bristol and Lincolnshire and Cambridge and everywhere. I didn't have that many young people. And suddenly the doors burst open one Saturday and this trail of young people who were sheepish at first and terrified of coming in suddenly decided to pop their heads in.
There's a cure for this. I don't want it. I don't want it. If there's a remedy,
the shop had this very strange effect. It seemed to bring together all these kids from all over the place. And there didn't seem to be any limits to where people would come from to visit the shop. You know, we'd have kids coming from Northern Ireland and stuff and buying a load of things all in one go, obviously. But mainly the suburbs. It was almost like there was a little group, a big group of people just waiting for something like this out in the suburbs. And once they'd come to the shop, they were almost addicted to it. You know, we had a little joke going on about the Bromley contingent.
The Bromley contingent was Siouxsie, Siouxsie Sue, Steve Severin, Steve Bailey, Sharon Hayman, Simone Thomas, Billy Broad, who went on to be Billy Idol, myself. And that was the main nucleus. Usually on a weekend, like a Friday or Saturday night, we'd all get done up and go to Bromley South station and go up into the West End. When we became friendly with Siouxsie, she had discovered this club called Louise's, and she decided that we were going to all dress up fantastically and just go up to this club on a Friday night in the West End, because we all have very particular individual styles. Myself and Siouxsie and all those people connected. Mine came from cabaret and from Christopher Isherwood, that kind of thing. Siouxsie's came from a kind of 50s, 60s, Medrici kind of glamour.
I was well into stilettos, and I think I discovered sex, the shop Sex then. So I had things like, and also She and Me. That was cheap S&M gear. But I always liked the black, shiny black. And I was always attracted to dark-haired women. I liked the Marilyns and that, but I was really attracted to people like Carolyn Jones and Ada Barr, Louise Brooks, and also Betty Boop. And there's so much gone into what I look and why I look. And part of it is to be threatening looking. Part of it is to be confrontational.
If you look closely, you'll find a little swastika on it somewhere.
One of my accoutrements was an armband with a swastika, which was purely out of high camp, nothing else.
I didn't know quite what the effect it was having on people, except when we would go to Louise's, and the DJ was a Jewish lesbian, and people would go down wearing swastikas, and she'd have like a fit.
Somebody nearly killed me down there once because I was wearing this swastika armband. And it made me really mad because I understand if an old man who'd been in a concentration camp or had been one of the rare people to survive had come up, but there's this ongoing generation after generation of horror at it when, I mean, it's obvious that I wasn't a Nazi, I mean.
I attended Stanley Tech in South Norwood Hill, I think it was, oh yeah, where the bronze bust was nicked. Let me think, it must have been in my 3rd year.
Lying in wait outside Virgo for Dalis and the Lady Edridge Grammar School. I worked at the Fairfield Halls. I was a carsy cleaner, you know, and I'm not ashamed of that. You've got to do something for a living, haven't you? A carsy cleaner, member of the damned, why not, you know? But I understood someday I'd be back in my own right, giving concerts in my own peculiar way.
Electric Light Orchestra, Pentangle, they all played here, and I used to have far too much to drink and jump up on stage with them and get beaten up by the bouncers and thrown out the back door, you know? And I always thought it would be fantastic to get up on stage and do it. And I remember grabbing a cello from some bloke out of the Electric Light Orchestra. Yeah, and I kicked him off the stage. I grabbed the cello and I played about 3 things, you know, something like that, and I couldn't, you know, I just didn't know what I was doing.
I'll be back another day, saying sod alive.
Britain's full of rednecks. The country's full of, like, very conservative people frightened by anything that's remotely different. I got my teeth beaten down me in Croydon High Street. It was very unpleasant.
But I'll still be dreaming of you, Croydon. Be coming Croydon way in the cold and rain.
I didn't actually get picked on particularly, because there's always other people in the group to like stand up for you, particularly Siouxsie, who was fantastic. I grew up in South London, first of all in Catford, and then when I was about 9 or 10, I moved to Bromley. As a result of being in secondary school and living in Bromley, I had a nervous breakdown.
So messed up, I want you here.
It felt just very suburban and anonymous. But also there's another sense of kind of perviness, of kind of what goes on behind the net curtains, and who's doing what to whom, all very undercover and sort of twilight.
And I'll lay right down in my favorite place.
I think Berlin was just finding out about his own sexuality, and it's like doing this all the time. And there's a lot of people are finding out about what their sexuality was as well. We just, you know, we just thought, I know what, let's really give them something to talk about.
Now I wanna be your dog.
let's go into that stupid pub. I'll take you in on a lead. You can wear your black cat suit and I'll put a dog collar on you. And I'll wear my pink stilettos with see-through bits and a big dress and blah, blah, blah. And I'll walk in, order you a bowl of water and myself, I don't know, vodka or something. And I'll order you to sit and drink. And we did that. We just went deadly quiet in the place. I mean, you know, they gave us a bowl of water. And I was saying, I must for my dog. And of course they thought, oh God, you know, has she escaped from somewhere? And of course they complied with us. We were in control of the situation, had our drinks, and I said, come on, walkies.
And he had a dog collar on, with a dog's chain round his neck, and a little bit of leather where you hold onto the dog light at the end. There's nothing good about that, is there? I look idiot.
What you have to appreciate, although you were selling rubber clothes and whips and chains and all sorts of things, you were still playing Eddie Cochran and Chuck Berry and many other well-known rock and roll legends. And the fact that you were doing that and not playing Mozart or something else that might have been endearing to the older set, meaning the Rubber Duck Club, it really kept and continued to increase the younger clientele, and ultimately, perhaps, the more, I suppose, cutting-edge, garage-type rock and roll extremists, such as Iggy Pop, who was at that moment living in London under the tutelage and patronage of the more successful David Bowie. And another more extreme and wonderful peacock-looking transvestite type group called the New York Dolls.
Looking for a kiss. Well, I keep looking for the real hot kiss. Come on, kiss
me. They thought I was some cool dude having this sort of shop, and they thought I would be of some use to them in the managerial underworld of New York. And I went off to New York. I just left the shop suddenly, went to New York, fell in love with a shop assistant I had, who was a young American girl called Addie, only to discover when I arrived in New York that she'd had plastic surgery and changed her face. And I thought, God, I didn't even recognize her. But forgetting that and moving on to the New York Dolls, I suddenly started to be involved with them.
They say we were the band you love to hate. And there was a certain truth in that. Because first we got them with our looks, which was not planned, by the way. That was so natural, it was pathetic. It just happened. The way we looked on the streets was the way we looked basically on stage. You'd never find a doll, a New York doll, carrying his clothes on a hanger over his shoulder. You just wouldn't find that. It wasn't necessary. If we wanted to go right on stage with the drags we had on, boom, we did it.
Flying around New York City so high, like he was my baby. My baby.
We could have fun with this. Basically, generally, let's keep the songs, the music, hot and 50s, magical. The 2-minute song, the 3-minute song, no more than that. The 2.5-minute song, hit and run. Come on stage, hit and take off.
I didn't come here looking for no sex. I know I've been howling on streets all night long, just looking for a kiss.
The type of songs were basically established by the Velvet Underground, the Dolls, and the Ramones. That kind of short, fast street music, talking about daily life among a culture of kids in a big city. The clothes and attitude, all the things, the ripped clothes and riding on your clothes and leather jackets, and those marks of punk were basically created in New York by the Ramones and me and Patti Smith. The Ramones didn't have any kind of literary background, but Patti Smith and I did. Funny, those kind of style things derived as much from our idea of French symbolist poets as anything else. You know, the fantasy of, you know, Gerard de Nerval walking around Paris with a lobster on a ribbon. The haircut, for instance, I got from Rimbaud and maybe Jean-Pierre Léaud in 400 Blows.
Trains were falling at the window as the doctor cursed. He was a far too long for incineration, but I can take it or leave it each time. I belong to the generation, but I can take it.
Malcolm made a note of everything it took that he's seen made a reaction. He jotted this down on paper if he had to, maybe that night, but he jotted it down constantly, always. He had a lot of other things in mind. Little by little, he wanted to take over. He wanted to manage the group, which I thought totally was a damn fucking joke.
He wanted me to go back to England and start a band with me being the singer, but I didn't want to do that. So he used everything that was transportable, you know, the haircut and the clothing style and the mode of the material and transplanted it to London.
A lot of the elements came out of New York. What a lot of hogwash that is. My view of New York at that time was a bunch of prattish pretend poets moaning over some turgid version of rock and roll. Absolutely nothing to do with any of that. Not no shape or form. But, you know, people will try and grab whatever glory they can to make themselves seem more important. If you've got any value at all, really, you wouldn't be doing that kind of rubbish. If that was true, for instance, and we stole it all off them, well, more fool them for only having one idea.
And that's where you're wrong.
I'm never more happy than when I'm parodying the English. I like to parody the English because I'm English. And there's another thing as well, which is that English fabrics have an awful lot of content because they had this empire. Nearly every fabric that's produced in England has got a kind of emotional charge.
Over the course of a year or something like that, Steve and Paul came in and I struck up some kind of relationship with them. It wasn't really like a friendship thing, it was mainly stopping them from nicking things because Steve used to like to pull on this, that and the other. Steve and Paul were really, at one stage, were quite the skinheads of their particular area. And there was a thing that skinheads, instead of wearing beetle crushers on it, actually went for, what do you call them, brothel creepers. So they were like that mod West London, heavily dressing up, being the most hip kind of guys around.
We were always interested in music, right from early age, you know, but from when we were, say, skinheads and that, we was very interested in the blue beat and all the Motown, early Motown stuff. That's what we first started listening to, really.
And they had a band, and they had a band, the bass player at the time was Paul's brother-in-law, I think it was, but he wasn't really taking it seriously. They wanted to take it a bit more seriously. So I'd mentioned to Malcolm that I was a bass guitarist, what I was kind of learning at that stage. And he suggested to Steve and Paul that why don't they try me out? So I went and hung out with them a bit and had a bit of a play, and that was it.
We needed a front man, as it were, you know, and we thought the best place to find him would be probably the shop, you know, keep your eye out for people who come into the shop. And around this time there was a group of guys, probably much like ourselves, but who came from the north side of London, who was John Lydon, and a gang of friends who used to come into the shop probably for the same reasons we did, you know, on a Saturday or whatever. There was a group of them, apparently all called John. We noticed them coming in because they looked quite different. They all had shaven heads and green-coloured hair and stuff. And we arranged to meet John one night in a pub just down the road.
We gave this singer an audition in my shop later on, after the pub had closed, for him to imitate and for him to try to sing along with an Alice Cooper track on the jukebox called 18, which I adored. And he sung it like the Hunchback of Notre Dame with a handkerchief over his nose, I think with some embarrassment, really.
John just started getting into spasms in front of the jukebox and singing and doing his act, what later became everyone knows and loves, you know. And I knew right away then that he was the singer, he was going to be the one, really.
Sing, he could perform, he was sexy. I remember one thing that sticks out in my mind, and I don't know why. The band's playing, and some scene is being created, and I don't hear no music. So what I'm seeing is Johnny. He had beautiful real baggy pants, and he had those, what do you call those shoes? Those those big, fat, thick shoes, you know.
I thought he had a certain style, because he chose a very good pair of shoes, which was a pointed brothel creeper that I was doing in white buckskin at the time.
I think somebody was giving him a hard time in the audience. So he goes into his pocket very slowly at his own pace, and he pulls out some change. And he's like counting his change, like make sure he has enough for bus fare to get on the bus and go home. You know, that's what it looked like to me. And it's the way he did it with such humor and camp, tongue-in-cheek, and I like that.
It was amazing because the Sex Pistols used to have carte blanche, really, and they would just come in and pick clothes that they wanted and have it styled on them, or they would just, you know, the stories are quite true about sort of John Rotten just cutting arms off and things of clothes, or cutting necks off. And the Sex Pistols, that whole bondage thing, of course, was very, very much linked. The bondage trousers and the bondage jackets were very much linked with the Sex Pistols. And we sold many, many of those. The bondage trousers, I should think, was probably one of the most popular pairs of trousers since jeans were invented.
Clothes don't really matter to me. They're things to enjoy, but not take too serious. It becomes a tragedy, though, when you get an audience trying to imitate that, and you get Malcolm and Vivian mass-producing it in their shop. It's quite disastrous, really. It's like the kiss of death, because it all then suddenly becomes so commercial, so regular, and so mundane. It becomes a uniform. Be a punk, join the army.
Well, almost from the start, I think I was aware that it was some sort of a movement. I mean, I always use the fact that, I mean, when I saw the first punk girls, I say girls rather than women advisedly because they were very young. I saw the first punk girls on the street. I used to think they ought to be taken into care for their own protection because when I was in the army, there was an offence with which you could be charged, which was like people used to shoot themselves in the foot to avoid being sent overseas to somewhere like Cyprus. And I used to think that if there was some kind of civil equivalent to that, then these people should be charged with it because they appeared to be willfully disfiguring themselves. And then, like a week later, I could see the same person, and for no real reason that I could identify, it suddenly looked great.
Cannily, or maybe anything, Sex Pistols, and you're active immediately. It was true to say that I was denied access to a lot of the colleges. I remember phoning up the Chelsea College of Technology, the women in charge of the union putting the phone down because they refused to have a group like that on stage. And so I ended up really playing in the places that I knew I would find more acceptance, which was my early days having been at art school and being in an environment of more of the dispossessed, or let's say the bohemian, those with a certain aesthetic flair, would be the places that the Sex Pistols should play. So they started at art schools, and that was, when I look back at it now, in the tradition of a lot of rock and roll, which actually came out of art schools. It was explosive, and I think the curiosity about punk rock that still prevails today was simply because it was sexually a very hot moment for a huge wanting that those that became part of indulged in, that generation.
Must have been my 16th birthday party, Berlin's baby bondage party. This was in Plaistow Grove, Bromley.
It was called Sex Olympics, I think. All the Pistols were invited and various friends, and this was in a suburban house whilst his parents were away, and on either sides were busybodies.
People just came and drank and took sulfate and fucked and drank and took sulfate. They were fucking on the hall, in the bath, in my mum's bed, in my bedroom, in the garden, in the front garden, in the garden path. Wherever they could, they did it. It's fantastic. I've never seen purple sheets splattered like that. And my parents used to have these awful what do they call them? Polystyrene tiles on the room, and there was Susie's whip marks all across them when they came back.
What are those scratches? What could have caused them?
Kids?
Well, they must be bolder than in your young day.
Well, I certainly think the aggression that was around, and which came through a lot of women at the time. I mean, someone like Patti Smith certainly had that, and also the slight ambiguity of being not masculine but boyish as well, and lesbianism as well. And I think that's always a very, I always like to leave that open. It doesn't bother me at all what someone's sexuality is, and it shouldn't bother anyone at all. It's none of their business.
People were opening up to being what they were. I mean, if you're straight, you're straight. You should be proud of that, etc., etc. All the way down the line. With punk, women were no longer pretty little backup singers. They could stand up on their own and shout and scream.
Siouxsie Banshee paraded herself at the screen on the green on one of those great nights that we did there, you know, baring her breasts. And all the sexual come-on, which I stupidly thought was just some kind of act, was all going on in the toilets in the bloody cinema that I didn't realise and wasn't part of. But, of course, all my friends were participating in. I do remember coming back once and seeing Vivian in bed with Sharon, who was Berlin's friend from Bromley, and thinking it quite outrageous, and then suddenly hitting myself and feeling I was dreadfully conservative. One of the huge hangouts of the Sex Pistols was a prostitute named Linda that had and administered various people, from Robert, who crawled around on hands and knees and was whipped up his arse and so on. And Jones certainly copulated with her, and so did many others. It was always Saturday night after Louise's in Poland Street did they all venture to this hotel in the Edwardian Quarter close to Buckingham Palace. I remember it as a place in which even the fatal girl, Nancy Spungen, who wished to bed Rotten, was thrown off and ended up in bed with Sid Vicious.
When you're on the outside, let's just be honest, prostitutes are, they're not like the norm. They tend to go into environments and clubs where they know they won't be pestered when they're not working, and that'd be the places I'd be, for precisely the same reasons. And that's where you would make friends. And we wouldn't have to pay for it either. You go where life's easier for you, which is usually where the freaks hang out.
Lesbian, gay men, transvestites, prostitutes, midgets. You know, it's like a carnival, like a bizarre carnival of people, subterranean people. Every combination you can imagine. Every combination, imagine. Sleaziest people, drug dealers, everything. Crims. The works, Malcolm included.
I was brought up by my grandmother in a very closeted Victorian manner. Certainly had no association with my mother that I can even think of, other than her being an incredibly man-mad and ultimately the mistress to Charles Claw. And I don't really think that that sex provided a major role in my life until I actually left England and cavorted in Hollywood with Lauren Hutton. But I do think that the darkness and the labyrinthine world of London at the times of Dickens that I was brought up on and made to read, the frustration of the Bronte sisters. It was my first book at the age of 5, was Jane Eyre. And all that stuff filled me with, I was almost not scared of sex, but sort of found it a world that I didn't really know how to venture into in any, well, major way, like Mr. Jones. London for me and the making of the Sex Pistols, if I really think about it now, was a way of me going back to my childhood and reliving it. I think the Sex Pistols was a marvellous way of becoming a teenager again.
John was lucky to sing the way that he did. You know, he was lucky to get it to sound good with the one kind of style that he mastered, and the style that he mastered was that very English kind of thing.
Well, there's no way on earth I was going to fake an American accent just because everybody else did. It can't be denied that we could only have ever come from Britain. That's what we are.
Steve and Paul were big Faces fans. That was our common ground. And they wanted to form a band purely because of the Faces initially. And then you can trace that quite quickly back to the Small Faces and bands like The Who. We did have a mod sensibility, but we didn't sort of dress to be like that. But I think there was a kind of a laddishness that went with that as well. And I think that's really sets the Pistols apart from the other bands, because we had that. I mean, they only see the sort of safety pins, and people who try to copy us only see the safety pins and the bin liners and the raggedliness of that. But there was a spirit there that I think was encapsulated when they were doing Pretty Vacant and Steve wears the knotted sort of Gumby hat kind of thing. But nobody else would have been able to carry that off because they just didn't have that inherent lad kind of thing about them at all. I mean, the Clash weren't like that at all.
Where are those happy days? They seem so hard to find. It's like
I mean, sort of say Pretty Vacant, that's nicked, you could say it's nicked, or material was found from a number of sources, one being Wham Bam Thank You Man by the Small Faces, and another one, SOS, I think it was, by ABBA.
the love you gave me, nothing else could save me. SOS. When you're gone, how can I even try to go on?
Because they had like a diversity of things to draw from, and when all the second division bands came along, they just copied us, and they didn't understand all those things, and that was why they were substandard somehow.
In Britain, the Sex Pistols, of course, especially, carried the seeds of ideas that we had to their conclusions so well, and embodied so completely and absolutely the message that it sort of made everybody else irrelevant. They were the essence of it, and surpassed us all. They didn't have any of that baggage of thinking about it in advance. They were just, you know, restless, loudmouth, obnoxious kids who behaved that way in public.
Don't accept the old order. Get rid of it.
That is saying to the older generation, you know, you have mismanaged the world, you are corrupt, and you're destroying us. And so it was like, put a spanner in the works, let's fuck up. The anarchy sort of side of things actually came more from me. If you think of myself and Malcolm in a partnership there. And he was very, very keen on this situationist slogan about autonomy for kids. And by that, he thought that the best way to confront the English society was to be as overtly obscene and pornographic as possible. Young kids didn't want it. They'd rather go down the street with Anarchy in the UK on their back than a pornographic T-shirt.
There was no Anarchy in the UK at the time, you know. We just hoped there was going to be, hence the song, you know. I don't think we was naive to believe we were going to change the world through music, but we definitely wanted to give people a different outlook and a different attitude towards whatever, life and music and stuff. We just wanted to shake things up a bit, really.
I had a kinship spirit in the fact that we all hated everything.
I do remember when they came down to Stiff Records, hot off the presses, with Anarchy in the UK, and we sat round, we all listened to it with bated breath. What are our rivals up to? What sort of thing have they come up with? Because they were rough and ready on stage, and that, nobody knew what they were going to sound like, you know? And we all sat there, like, sort of pissing ourselves with laughter, and nobody could believe they said it sounded like some redundant old Bad Company outtake with, like, old man Steptoe singing over the top. Our old feet the ulcer. You know, it's like, I couldn't believe Anarchy in the UK. But of course it was absolutely massive. You know, I just thought punk should, whatever it was, it should have been like sort of pretty up tempo, and like the Pistols were, great guys and everything, and God, lummy.
Like a stormy sea. I don't know why. I guess these things have gotta be. I've got a new rose, I've got a good.
Crikey. New Rose was just one of a bunch of songs that we recorded for the first album, of which I know nothing about them. I know nothing about the lyrics or anything. I just went in and we recorded the whole lot, sort of, we're aided by a little bit of cider here and a little bit of sulphate there, and it's a total blur.
I got a new rose, I got a good. Guess I knew that I always would. I can't stop to mess around. I got a brand new rose in town.
Well, for me, yes, it was the most important part of the whole thing was the fact that the whole process of making records was demystified, and you know, lads up in Manchester or Liverpool or Newcastle or Glasgow or wherever realised that they didn't have to come down to London and make themselves, you know, available to some kind of grisly entrepreneur who's going to make them rich and famous overnight. They can actually make records back home, you know. If the bass player sold his bike and they rolled one or two phone boxes, they could get enough money together to make their own single.
You mind? Yeah, well, we're police officers, that's why we're asking, because the kids have just been trying to screw the phone box.
Boredom.
Well, the whole idea behind punk in some ways was the do-it-yourself mentality, because nobody else was there to do it for you. And so we borrowed some money in order to get projects off the ground. And for £500 we got 1,000 records, which we managed to dump into unsuspecting distributors. And once we got the money for that, that allowed us to do another 1,000.
Ba-dum.
Yeah, the song on Boredom was a reaction against all the 20-minute guitar solos, which are usually on two sides of an album. I mean, I think it was just done as a joke, as most things were in those days. What we were singing about was just angst and disillusionment and things, because those were the topics of the genre. We always sought the humour in the situation as well as the anger, because it's a very sad world if you can't laugh at misfortunes as they happen.
Pretty girls, pretty boys, have you ever heard a mommy say lies are nice? Pretty girls, pretty boys, have you ever heard a mommy say lies are nice?
You know, last time I took them in, you couldn't sit down in them.
I know, but they went all right after that. Once I sat down in them a couple of times.
I'll put this zip back in for you, and then I'll have to, if you're in a hurry to go out tonight in them, I'll have to put that other piece on.
No, I'm not wearing them tonight, that's why I give them you.
Pretty boys, have you ever heard a mommy shout
You don't think you look ridiculous?
No, and my friends don't think I look ridiculous. And they're the ones that matter.
The magazine came about through Buzzcocks, and they told me to start my own band up right from the start, which I never did because I'm tone deaf. That's a simple reason. But I wanted to be part of it, so I started the fanzine off.
Well, I think the cast of the Manchester punk scene were already there by the time that Sex Pistols played the Anarchy thing. So, in a way, it developed differently to the London scene because the London scene was more record company driven. So it was only when people made occasional forays up into Manchester to see what was happening up in the grim north that there was any interest from London. It was a bit like Australia, the animals had the chance to develop in their own peculiar ways, untainted by what was happening in the rest of the world.
What's your dress made from?
It was a lot of very separate, almost unconnected people that were connected in one way, in that they wanted to do something about not being happy about the situation they were in. It was a great time for making something out of nothing. Money didn't mean anything, and hence, you had the idea whereby you could invent yourself out of nothing.
You tried to get bands together?
Yeah, I did the 100 Club, the punk festival. Siouxsie and the Banshees.
What did you sing?
The Lord's Prayer via Twist and Shout, Knocking on Heaven's Door, and a bit of Deutschland, Deutschland, über alle.
And who was backing you up?
Sid Vicious on drums, Steve Spunker on bass, Marco on guitar, and me just doing the vocals.
Are you a singer?
Yeah.
Had you sung before?
Not on stage, no.
Did you think that was important?
No.
The whole punk thing was the people on stage were the same as the people off stage. And the people off stage often form better groups than the people on stage. But they were all there. I'll never forget the faces standing there, people, household names now, were standing there having like a pint of beer watching the Damned at the 100 Club, I mean, I've got the name Captain Sensible, or there's a Sid Vicious or a Johnny Rotten, is really because none of us thought it would last more than 5 minutes. And, when your manager, whoever it was at the time, says to you, we're building a career here, you take that with a pinch of salt. You think, crikey, nobody's going to listen to this for more than a couple of weeks. So you go down the Dole office, says, no, I've never heard of the Damned. No, that's, he looks like me, but that's Captain Sensible. So I'm Ray Burns, you see. Everyone changed their names. That's why all these weird names about. Nothing to do with, bravado or anything.
I went into the A&R department and said, who are these crazy guys, man? I mean, who are they? This is the Sex Pistols. We just signed them. They're tremendous. And my first actual plug for them was after all this, was by phoning up the Today programme and speaking to Mike Housego, the producer. It was a really tense decision. They phoned me and said, yes, we'd like to use the Sex Pistols, will they be okay? I said, I'm sure they'll be all right.
I am told that group have received £40,000 from a record company. Doesn't that seem to be slightly opposed to their anti-materialistic view of life?
The more the merrier.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Well, tell me more about it.
We fucking spent it, haven't we?
I don't know, have you?
Yeah, it's all gone.
Really?
Down the boozer.
Really? Good Lord. You are serious? Beethoven Mozart, Bach and Brahms have all died.
Ours, aren't they?
Really?
Oh,
What are we saying, sir?
wonderful people.
Are they?
Oh, yes, they really turn us on.
What do they do?
Well, suppose they turn other people on.
That's just their tough tricks.
Which one?
Nothing, a rude word. Next question.
No. What was the rude word?
Shit.
Was it really? Good heavens, you frightened me to death.
All right. See,
what about you girls behind?
He's like your dad, isn't he, this geezer? Or your granddad.
Are you?
Yeah.
That's what I thought you were doing.
Always wanted to meet you.
Did you really?
Yeah.
We'll meet afterwards, shall we?
You dirty son. You dirty old man.
Go on, you've got another 5 seconds. Say something outrageous.
You dirty bastard.
Go on, again.
You dirty fucker.
What a clever boy.
What a fucking rotter.
Well, that's it for tonight. The other rocker, Abel, and I'm saying nothing else about him, will be back tomorrow. I'll be seeing you soon. I hope I'm not seeing you again. From me, though, good night.
It was the best bad publicity that you could possibly get, really. I mean, apart from ruining Grundy, it alienated the Sex Pistols from every ordinary, normal, God-fearing person in the country, which immediately made every child of those God-fearing parents absolutely adore the Sex Pistols. And there was a great influx of outrage and on one hand and love on the other.
I will do everything I can to prevent certain groups, whom I do not propose to name on this programme, from ever appearing in London again. What's wrong with that? I represent the licensing authority.
Latest reports on the amazing and still unexplained paralysis of London, England. In the past hour, it seems to have spread to outlying districts. Hello? Hello? Go ahead, pilot.
Kyle Philly didn't quite know what to expect, so took no chances. Pubs and cafes were closed before and after the concert. On decibel points, the Sex Pistols won. On numbers, it was a victory for the carol singers.
I think it's degrading and disgusting for our children to hear and see such things.
The thing is, they're outside, freezing. We're in here, all right.
The Anarchy Tour was total fun. Everything about it was a gas. It was great. Malcolm sends a letter. It says the Sex Pistols tour. What we really want is the Dolls. And that was absolutely no. Forget that. So Malcolm said, okay, how about you and Jerry and your band, the Heartbreakers? Okay, well, you got them. Now, out of all those dates, how many dates would you say are there? Look, a quick guess. I don't know, 40, 38, 40, 30 some odd. I think we only did 5 or 6 dates. And we're lucky we got them. I mean, every time we went into an area, Leeds, you name it, whatever we went into, we had little babies, little people, little girls and boys who know nothing whatsoever about musical politics, with their mothers and their fathers, and they're picketing and then going apeshit over the fact that we, these bad boys, are doing a gig in their town.
We have done everything humanly possible to ban this thing and to stop it. And we are doing all we can to set an example in leadership and in every other way for clean living, holy living, and pure.
Coming back next time?
Yeah, I just follow them everywhere.
The average adult can go see a strip show or a blue film. But after their TV performance of the Sex Pistols, when foul language was used, after the performance with the Derby councillors and the obscenities that were written on, I believe, the dressing room...
It wasn't any different than how the New York Dolls have behaved in America. It was exactly the same, throwing up in airports and, you know, saying fuck you to interviewers.
Try so hard to be nice.
It worked so well there because the place is so small and the news spreads just like that. Here, we'd taken over New York. In England, that would have been enough. You take over London, you've taken over the whole island. And they had a situation in England that was completely ripe for it, a political situation. You know, nobody was working, and there were so many kids who were, didn't have any future and didn't have anything to do with their time.
Like you just come out of Rizzler for the day, done it?
You won't go and see it, I tell you. I wanted to do something for me. Because look at me now, I'm nothing.
That's what punk is.
Trying to forget your generation.
The whole idea that it was some camaraderie of a movement really appalls me. And I really didn't like a lot of bands around at the time. I felt nothing to do with them. I found there was a lot more rock and roll to a lot of bands at the time than we certainly ever were interested in.
I was just talking about all forms of bondage, you know, repression, everything else, and sexual bondage stems from that, so it's all part of the same thing, really. It all depends which way you interpret it.
So it's much to do with social bondage as sexual bondage?
Yeah, it's to do with all bondage. And it's bondage because it hasn't been played, that proves it as well.
The Sex Pistols were typical of this point of view. And also, I think X-Ray Specs were a very good group in terms of how I've defined rock and roll as being simply rebellion and up yours. And then you got people who were more confused, like the Clash, sort of boasting about working class origins and actually thinking that they were important and they could do something. And, of course, we realised straight away that these people like that were victims.
Yeah, tell me about White Riot. What's it about?
Notting Hill Gate. We was down there, me and him, and we got searched by policemen.
You like it?
Yeah.
Doesn't make me look too Jewish, does it? No, we're all right.
John wasn't into going to Rio, you know. Simple as that, really. He flew off to New York, I think it was, and that was the last we saw of each other, really, as far as the Pistols were concerned. Unfortunate way to end, but that's the way it was, you know.
All the pluses that John had were his ultimate undoings. That he was not a particularly stable, emotional person. Those insecurities became evident in a really big way. But that was part of his charm and part of his look, really, because he had that sort of insecure look about him. I think that's what broke them up. I think that it was that ultimate personality weakness that I'm larger than life, I don't need this anymore, I can go off and do my own thing, and I don't need the stress of all this, I don't want to be Sex Pistol anymore.
Everybody wants their instant hit, but they won't listen, I'm afraid, and neither would we at the time, probably, that what comes with that instant hit and instant fame is a total deluge of your life. It's completely soul-destroying. You lose your bearings, you lose your perspective, and you lose your reason for doing it in the first place, which is that you like to do it.
I thought Sid Vicious was wonderful, and he could have become a huge star in Las Vegas, but it was more of a dream than a reality, and Sid had to go his own way. And so he was that wonderful junkie, tear it up, destroy, straightforward rock and roll enthusiast, and wished to imitate Eddie Cochran. I don't think that it was terribly creative.
For Sid, though, I will say that it was a chance to be the superstar he always wanted to be, and he did it quite well. It's a shame he bought the whole hog. Sex, drugs, and death. What a pity.
God Save the Queen was the most English, angst-ridden, toughest, motherfucking rock song that has ever been written. No question, there's nothing American in that song. And that was, to me, punk rock at its best.
Woo! Wash yourself in the blood, hallelujah. Wash yourself in the blood, hallelujah.
I mean, the Pistols went off and became a rock and roll band, and Siouxsie developed her band, and everybody just started to disperse. After that initial coming together, as a Bromwich Condition, we all completely dispersed and went our own separate ways.
The blood of rock and roll. The blood, the blood, the blood, the blood.
Because it just became too heavy, too nasty. It had become something else, really. It really had. It lost its perversity, it lost its specialness. I mean, the aggressive thing and the energy thing about that movement was fantastic. I mean, I think a lot of it's probably to do with taking blues, the dextrin and sulfate, but it had a tremendous amount of energy, and the energy just became more and more twisted.
On one level, you always want the culture to expand and to influence and inspire everybody, but then on the other hand, once the media gets in, it's going to be slightly commercialized. But me, personally, I love the commercialization of culture. I was always a great fan of Top of the Pops, and I quite liked seeing how the influence of punk got commercialized. If you like, for instance, Jordan, and Jordan's look, and the play, the revolutionary play on fetish and denying that, how that's been cleaned up by Madonna, I think is very interesting. And I would, Madonna, in a sense, is straight out of punk. So, so I wouldn't complain necessarily about the commercialization of punk.
King's Road's changed dramatically since the 70s. You only have to look around you to see that it's got building society itis, and there's Marks and Spencers in King's Road. People that frequent this place are the ordinary sort of lowest common denominator type person. The 70s, this place would have been absolutely full of the most amazing looking people. All you see is these kids going up and down the street on their bikes, their mountain bikes, with this sportswear on, pretending that they're motorcycle messengers or something. Somebody with a mission. Whole world has turned into one giant motorcycle messenger. They're trying to be like Californian beach people. It's the antithesis, really, of what English people are all about. But I feel that there's hope, and there's still the same sort of people who are in the suburbs in this country, and that someday something just as exciting might come along.
What clattering noise is this, at which my snakes all hiss? What clattering noise is this, at which my snakes all hiss? What clattering noise is this? I hate to see ya. Ah, yeah!